Today's daf is daf Ayin Tes, and we're continuing to learn about whether we said the last thing we learned was the subject about royin. Do we imagine that if there's two things mixed together in a good mixer, do we imagine that the thing which is less is as if it's something, for example, if it's the same appearance, how in the world can you tell whether it's the quantity that fell in is insufficient to make it possible or not? So we imagined that if it would have been water, let's say, would the blood of the carbon still retain its color or not? That's called the concept of royin. And we had a machlekes, we had two tanoi, whether we say royin or we don't say royin. And we also brought down on machlekes whether b'mina, if it's the same kind, do we say that on the contrary, they reinforce each other, and therefore it remains us. So now Rava makes a conclusion here. Rava Omar, right in the middle of the page of Ayin Tes Amar Aleph. Omar Rava says Rava. Three things. Omar Rabbanan b'taima, the Rabbanan make a comment regarding taste. Amar Rabbanan Beruben, sometimes they apply the rule of the majority. You go after Achirabim Lahatas, you go after the majority. And sometimes Amar Rabbanan Bechazusa, they made also a comment regarding appearances, where appearances count. So, for example, the blood of a korban that got mixed up with the blood of, or got mixed up with wine, got mixed up with water, it's very clear. Can you tell that it's still blood or not? If it got mixed up with wine, that's where royin comes in, and we imagine that wine component really is water. What would it have done to the blood? So now he spells it out. Mean if it's two different, if one thing falls into something which is totally different than betaima. You look at flavor. So Taish already points out, it doesn't say b'shishim. Normally we say min be'ein mina. If you have two things, one thing falls in, a drop of milk falls into a pot of meat. We'll say that min be'ein mina is bottle b'shishim. By Truma 101, by Klai Ken 201, it doesn't say shishim, which means like this: shishim is definitely midrabanan, because whenever you have a uniform rule, and you don't say let's try each one and see is there still a flavor of that treif there or not, or that thing that causes the problems. Means this is the Rabbanan came along and said these are the rules. Remember that we told Rabbi Yirmiyah, don't ask any questions about how to make rules, and it always stays. Timer is where you can still feel the flavor. It could be 10 times, and maybe it'll dissipate if it's a multiple of 10. So when it comes to flavor, tam, this is called tam ki'ika. Tracy wants to say that tam ki'ika is mahatayra, and that's what he's saying here. That min b'she'ein b'mina b'tama. So we're talking about mahatayra. Min b'she'ein b'mina, when is it can bottle? Only as long as you don't feel the flavor. But if you can still feel the flavor, even though it's not the majority is kosher, it's still asur matayra. Others disagree. They say that matayra, even min be'ein mina achri rabim lahatas, is always bottled. The Rabbanan asur and min. If we're having more Rabbi Zara, we had tama, you had taste. V'loy mam moshe, without having a substance, just a flavor, or tama umam moshe. Anyway, that's how we learn. So he's saying here that flavor is by min b'shem mina. Min b'mina, you can't do flavor. It's the same flavor. So therefore, beruba, it's mahatayra. It is bottled b'roiv. It's only with Rabbanan that we need shishim by min b'minay. Heicha de'ika chazusa, where the color matters. Like, for example, the blood, by the sprinkling on the bech, we need blood, so the color matters. Then b'mata, then we view the look at the color. Is it mixed in something else? Does it still retain its color? Okay. If it doesn't retain its color, remember, if it's very light pink, that's not good enough. It has to be a little bit look like blood. Then it sure depends. Upliga the Rabbeloza. Now, this what Reish Lakish said before, and yesterday we learned three dinim from what Reish Lakish said. Says the Gemara that these three things. One of them was he talked about over there that if pigul had exactly a kazayis of pigul, they ate something from a carbon that you had in mind for the next day, and you had exactly a kazayis of noiser or a kazayis of tameh. Right, and he said that if you chew them, what happens is you're not going to get lashes, even though you were warned. Why? Because as you chew, let's say you're chewing the piece of the nicer, there's also a little piece of pigul that's mixed in, because they're all mixed together, and whichever one is a majority becomes dominant, and whichever is a minority, Rashi learned, takes on the identity of the majority. So therefore, in one of those two, definitely there's going to be less than a kazai. One's going to have a bit more than a kazai, because you don't stand and measure it, be exact 50-50. One of them, eventually, you'll have eaten more than a kazai, because remember, the minority takes on the identity of the majority. So one of them will be more, one of them will be less. And therefore, you're not going to be chai, because Asra Safik, You don't know what you're giving a warning. You don't know which particular way you're giving a warning for. This is the way Rashi learned. So one of the three things that we learned from that din is that Isurim mevatim zeh. On the one hand, he said, treif, who cares if it's this or that? Fact is, you ate treif. No, it has to be specific. What exactly the treif is. This is nicer or is it pigul? And therefore, the nicer detracts from the pigul, and the pigul detracts from the nicer. They cancel each other out. So this concept is not uniform. It's not unanimous. What do you mean not unanimous? Because Rabbi Lazar argues. Mitzvahs don't cancel each other. Why? Yisurim don't cancel each other. Why? In other words, the real question is, what's the main thing of a mitzvah? The fact is it the general inyan, the inyan klali. This is the Eibishter's rotzen. I'm fulfilling Hashem's wishes. Is that the main part of a mitzvah, or the main part of a mitzvah is the specific details of the mitzvah? As explained in the Chassidus, that every single mitzvah brings down different geluyim from different levels, and tzilis from Zohar, from Chabad, whatever, like tefillin and all that. So therefore, it's the specific part of the mitzvah as well, and this explains many machlekes and throughout Shas. Whether we look at the general thing, starting from Ising mitzvah part to the mitzvah. If you're doing one mitzvah and you can do the other mitzvah, should you? Or there's no inyan doing the other mitzvah at all. And again, if you learn that it's all the general idea doing the Eibishter Ratzon, then I did the other mitzvah. I'm doing the Eibishter Ratzon. What's the point of doing I'm doing the Eibishter Ratzon? But if each mitzvah has its own inyan, and so even though you're doing one mitzvah, but if you can't do the other one, you're missing out. We actually had this according to some above. Rav Amnuna, you can tell that he didn't say Krishma, and he said he didn't because he went to save Pidyon Shvuyim, but he didn't get the benefit of that mitzvah as well. So it sounds from there that there's an inyan proti in every mitzvah. So therefore, if you learn the inyan klali, then mitzvahs don't cancel each other out. It's all the same. It's all the same. And the same chakira is by it comes to Isur. Comes to Yisurim. That's what he wants to say. He wants to say it by Yisurim as well. It's not the specific Aveda. It's the fact you're going against the Eibishter Ratzon. So therefore, why would Yisurim detract from the other one? Because he has Kashem. And a Shlakish could be he's made that mitzvahs are not about Zuzu, but it comes to Yisurim. Each Yisur does its own thing. So Mar says, you started off, you established a premise, just like mitzvahs don't cancel. Who told you mitzvahs don't cancel? How do you know that the mitzvahs don't cancel? The Gemara very simple. Hilali. We're Pesach. The Tanya Omer al Hillel said on Hillel Hazokim Shayakorchan Bevas Achas. He would wrap up the Pesach matzah mora together. But it says al matzah u'moradim yachlu. So l'chayda, that's what the Torah wants. What's pshat? You see it, you don't cancel. Otherwise, the mora should take away from matzah, and the matzah should take away from the mora. Especially mora is such a strong taste. Yeah, they all take away. But especially the mora is the strongest of them all. So maybe it should detract, and yet it doesn't. So actually, the question really is it? How do we view Pesach matzah mora? Is it three mitzvahs, and the Torah makes a t'nai, they should be eaten together, or this is another mitzvah? You have to have more than anything else, but there's a mitzvah, one mitzvah. They eat all three together. That is one mitzvah. So if you learn it's one mitzvah, then what's the eye from Hill? There's nothing to attract. That's the mitzvah. But if you learn there's three separate mitzvahs, so why would the Torah put three separate mitzvahs together if generally mitzvahs are mevatel each other? So you can say, is that eye from here that generally mitzvahs are not mevatel each other? In fact, they augment each other. They enhance each other. Anyway, so that's what we're trying to bring. All right. Learned. Okay, so we look right there. We learned Charsen Shalzov. So you have a shard, a clay shard, of a zov and a zova. But this is a like a what's it called, a urinal, a portable urinal. That's what basically it is. And what happened was, now the urine of a zov and a zova, a man or a woman who make these emissions, becomes totally tamei. And the urine over time gets absorbed into the keli. Because it's a clay cheres made out of clay, it can never be kashid. But it's only a shard. It's only a part of a keli, so it's already broken.
Isn't that takanofnik?
Yeah, that's if you true. But over here we're talking about tumah, so the laws are a little bit different than by kashing. So charsen shel zava. Now remember, this is not done through heat. When you do it through heat, that's when we say that clay cheres can never be kashed. It was just sitting there; it was cold. So you have now a shard, charsen shel zava. And you want to be able to use a shard for other things. So palm rishon, you put water on it the first time, the urine will come out, but not enough. V'sheni, you wash it a second time with water, then the urine comes out. Tummy. So sorry, the first two times is tummy, but shlishi put a third time the water. So the first time, some of it comes out. The second time of it, most of it comes out. You do a third time, all of it comes out. Now it's tummy. That's only we put in the water, so the water displaces the urine. We didn't use wine. Didn't use water as a cleanser. You used made aglayim urine of a toidiga person, which is min b'minay. Use that. Afilu asidi tame. Even 10 times is tame. Why? Because it's min b'minay. Urine versus urine. So it doesn't. On the contrary, it reinforces it. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov says shlishi. He says, I disagree. I hold that even min b'minay is bottled. So I hold shlishi. If he washed it a third time with melaglaim, so the first opinion of Tanakama is the view that min b'minay is not bottled. You can't use melaglaim of a toyer to cancel the melaglaim of a zov and a zova. Now, who do we remember? Rabba's conclusion yesterday. Who is the one who says that min b'minay is a filabel of a bottle? That's Rabbi Yehuda. The first answer we gave the Gemara is it's not Rabbi Yehuda, which the Gemara could answer straight away here. But we're going to follow the Rabba's view that it's Rabbi Yehuda, not just his Rebbe, but Rabbi Yehuda himself. I got a problem then. Why? Because Man Sham doesn't mean Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda is the one, the author of that mission. And what's the problem with that? The problem is not regarding min b'minay. The problem is regarding that you can wash out with water. Because Rabbi Yehuda has an opinion elsewhere that washing out with water doesn't work. And that's a follow-up. Aminu, that's a question that says, pisht and flax, shetavasa nida, that let's say a nida is spinning. Now by flax, when you're putting it through the machine, they have to use their spit to, to make it possible to go through the loops and whatever they're doing over there. And her spit is tummy, right? Her spit is tummy. So it says there, but it dried. So if you dried, if you touch it, you don't become tummy. But masita, if you move the whole thing, masita, if you move it, because it'll dry. But if it was moist, masita tummy. If it was moist and you move it, you are tummy. Because it's saliva from her mouth. Okay, it's saliva from her mouth. Now it's stuck between all the threads, so you don't really become tummy if you touch any of the threads. But because the spit is not really there, it's inside. But nevertheless, if you move the whole piece, you become tummy. Rabbi Yehuda says, Af haroit b'mayim, even if it totally dried up, if you put some water on it and you make it moist again, tummy, it resurrects the spit over there and it becomes tummy. And it's tummy because of mashkepia. Va'afilu tuva. I don't care how many times you put water on it. There's no limit. Every time you put water, it becomes tummy. You just said the Tanakama, which turned out to be the author, is Rabbi Yehuda, says that if you wash it a third time, all the tummy spit is gone, and all you have is the new saliva, the new water, the new urine, whatever, the new water. And here Rabbi Yehuda is the same opinion, and he says, when it comes to over here by Pishton, no matter how many times you put water through, there's always a little bit of the saliva left from before. What's the shot? What are you comparing? Shiny reik. Reik is very different. There's also some acids, enzyme. They cut it. It penetrates inside. In other words, everything else is sort of on the surface. This penetrates inside as you're spinning the yarn and everything else. You're putting saliva there, and the saliva is thick, so it goes deep. It penetrates deeply inside, so that you cannot. Even no matter how many times you put water on it, there's always residue different. Then the Mishnah finished off. What happens if the first part of the Mishnah was that the blood of the carbon got mixed up with water, got mixed up with wine, okay, or got mixed up with the blood of chulin, of all these things. So we said that we do this royin business. Okay. But then the Mishnah says, what happens if the blood of the carbon got mixed up with the blood of a possible carbon? For example, carbon was roiva nirba, or the carbon that was pigul. If the blood of an ordinary carbon got mixed up with blood of dam psulin, which we didn't have, that's a new case. Here we have a machlekes. Tanakama says you got to pour it out. Why did you say royin over here as well? The Gemara will say in a minute because of Xena. You pour it out. And Abelaz disagrees. He says it's kosher. If the Reiv is kosher, it's kosher. Or you do this Reiv business. Says the Gemara, what's going on here? What's the machlekes? The Gemara Gemifli, what's the argument? Why would the Tanakhama say that you have to pour it out? I'm going to read. The Goizin Gzeida b'migdash kamivli. You know what they're arguing about? B'chlal, whether you make Gzeida, we had a whole Gemara there in the end, whether the Shvusim in the base of Migdash, and then we said Shvus Godel there is and not Shvus Godel. Do we make Gzeidas in the base of Migdash? What's the Shaila? Every time we decide, you know what, we don't use this. We want to be careful because next time you'll make a bigger mistake. You make a mistake. But the problem is every time you say don't use this, you just took something that belongs to the base of Migdash, Kachim, and you ruined it. And we have to weigh up. What's more important? This is kosher right now and belongs on the Mizbech, and is that more important? And let's not make Gzeidas. Or do they say, no, we have to worry about the future, and therefore, even though it comes at a cost, to the base of Migdash. So that's the machlekes. So, because this over here, if dam of carbon got mixed up with dam psulin, we're going to say, well, if the rave is dam kachim is all right, we're worried that next time the rave will be dam psulin. Or, with the Rayin thing, if you do the Rayin, and the rave will be dam psulin, and you're going to continue using it. Gzeida. But if you're going to pass him right now that he shouldn't use it, you just took away from the base of Migdash a kosher to carbon. And that's the machlekes. Begoizing Gzeida b'migdash kamiflagi. The goys are Gzeida in the base of Migdash. One opinion says goyzin, we make Gzeidas, and therefore we say, you know what, pour it down the Amma, pour it down. So we have two cases in the Mishnah. One case is you got mixed up with the dam of psulin, and one is that the blood, which blood they have to the dam shanefesh yetzuba. And what happens if it's the initial blood that squirts out with pressure? And then afterwards, the blood continues flowing, which is called dam hatamtzis. Dam hatamtzis does not go on the mizbech, only dam. So what happens if the dam hanefesh tolabay got mixed up with dam hatamtzis? So the same thing. Chacham say you got to pour it out, and the blood is done. The same thing. We're going to, because next time you'll have more dam hatamtzis than dam hanefesh tolabay, and you're going to use it. If we're going to allow you to use it, in this case when it's the reiv is the good blood. Says the Gemara, that's a machlekes. That Papa says no. Generally speaking, yes, we have to sometimes make a gzeida for about this because it's to protect the base of Migdash in the future. But what machlekes here is? But they're arguing in the case of dam hatamtzis, is it motzui l'rabbis or dam hanefesh? Is it common to be? In other words, as the way that Papa says, in the first case when you have dam kosher animal of a carbon mixed up with dam of posula, that everyone is no machlekes. Even the Mishnah, there's no machlekes about the Chachamim. You know why? Because it's so common to have problems. You can have something about you have so many problems in the base of Migdash, so it makes sense that we're going to be geyser. Even Abelazar will say, yes, we're going to have to be geyser because it's such a common problem. If we're going to allow this, people are going to make mistakes and so on and so forth. However, in the case of Damatamtis, they're arguing: is it a chasht hanimtza? Is it common that the dam hatamsis, which is disqualified, is more than the dam shanefesh tolabay? If it's common, then we take zeta. No, it comes out the initial running out.
How much the dam nefesh is the first split?
Yeah, but it's a lot. It's a big bulk. It's a big lot, and then if you leave the for a little bit longer, it goes. Yeah, but the animals come out and roll. You make a little slit. You have to continue cutting to get more blood. So the question is it common enough? In other words, it's in between. It's not very common. It's not very rare. It's sort of in between that you'll have more dama tamsis than dama nefesh tolabay. So, and that's a machlekes. Could be arguing, is it common enough that we should worry about it? One said that it's common enough, and therefore the Chacham said we're going to be geyser, even in the case of dama tamsis. Rabbi says now. According to this version, they're only arguing the case of Damatamtis. The Mishnah breaks up in two separate cases because they only argue on one case. They only argue in the case of Damatamtis. They don't argue in the case of Damapsulun because that's very common to have in the base of English issues with other kabbanas, and therefore everyone will agree you have to be geyser because people don't know the difference. Because if it's the same machlekes whether we make zaydas or not, put the two cases together. Tasha, we have a problem. Says the Mishnah. So what happens now? Dam tamimim, the blood of regular kabbanas got mixed up, but dam bale mumin, with blood of bale mumin. You shafich la amma, you should pour down the amma. Now, why should you pour down the amma? Because the blood of a bal mum, you can't use them as vech. But Rashi says interesting. Rashi says it's a continuation before. This is like only exeter rabbanon. This is only exeter rabbanon. that we don't want, what do you call it? That we don't want you to use his blood because it's shkiach. It is shkiach to find possible animals, shkiach to happen, and therefore if we want to make a zeta because otherwise you're going to make a mistake next time. Yeah, something more right. Big cases. What happens? You have a cup of good blood that got mixed up, or cup of bad blood that got mixed up with a bunch of cups of good blood. Rabbi Lezer says, so now what do you have to go ahead? We can, because one of the cups is pasul adam. Rabbi Lezer says, if you brought up one cup, you can call a kaises. It's the exact same thing Rabbi Lezer said before. If you put up one head, these avodim that got mixed up. If you put up one head already, oil and chatas, he said, if you put up already one head, assume that that's it. And Chacham say, I feel the korban kulan. Chutz me'echmen yishavech la'ama. Chacham say, even you brought them all up, maybe the one that's behind is still the one that's a problem, and therefore you don't go ahead. What happens now? Let's say a carbon chatas. Chatas is the only carbon by an animal that you spray above the red line. All other carbonas you spray below the red line. So what happens if hanitoni lemato shenisarbu benitoni lemaila? A carbon that belongs below, an oil, shlomim, hosham, that got caught up, that got mixed up with a carbon chatas which is above the line. Rabbi Lezer says, what do you do? What do you do? Rabbi Lezer says, Yitin lemaila. Rabbi Lezer says, you pour it above. Very important. Rabbi Lezer says, you pour all the blood on top. All the blood on, not all the blood. You pour you pour a quantity of blood on top, and you say like this: if the blood, because it's all mixed together, we hold yesh bila, they mix well. So the part of the blood, which is part of karmachat, is perfect. It's on top of the red line. The rest of the blood that doesn't belong there, and we know that if you put up there, it's possible. I'll imagine royin keilu mayim. Rabbi Lezer is the one who believes in the concept of royin. We imagine that it's water. So what's the problem? What's the problem? The yachs of mat, and then you put them all down below. Now, what about the karmachatas part of it? It doesn't belong below. Yes, it does. Because what do you do with the shiraim of the blood of the karmachatas? After you sprinkled on the four corners, you pour it down. So you're pouring it down. Because it goes right down. So it runs down. So therefore, chatz is no problem, all the no problem. That's what he said you should do. And the Chum say, no. We don't believe in royin. We don't believe that you can go above the line and say that imagine the blood of the other kabbanas is water. We don't believe that. So therefore you have a problem. How can you take the blood of an oiler and pour it above the line? And therefore don't go ahead and do anything. You shafich la'ama. They say that what? That you pour it down the amma.
If it will trickle down to below the line, that doesn't count because the mailer.
Well, we had the Gemara before. If loibim mekoymoi, remember having in the I'm just looking right now, Chavav, that if you poured it above the line, the blood that belongs below the line, if you put it above the line, it's still kosher. So, because so because Kol is at the end of the day is still all right. So how do you understand over here this whole thing?
Because there has to be the mailer. If you put that below, it's not good. But you're saying put it above the line.
So the question is, why do you have to exactly? Why do it again below? So Teshuvah explains according to Rabbi Lezer. Since he says the only way you can do it is imagine that it's all water. So what's coming down? Water. That's why you have to do it again lamata. That's what you're doing on the lamata. That's the whole word. That's what Teshuvah explained before. Continue the Gemara. Okay, Chacham say no. We don't believe in the concept of royin, and therefore we can't do it blind. But the Kohen didn't ask any questions, and he did it. But even the Chacham say you did it already, kosher. We'll say that is kosher. Okay, because you did above the line and you did below the line. You did, so you've satisfied all the kabbanas. So what's kosher? The elyon is kosher. The elyon is kosher because you did the chat of the poil went on the base. You went on the mizbech. Now, we had this whole sugya in Rosh Hashanah there, and then hanitrani b'matanach has those kabbanas that you only have to sprinkle once. For example, a b'choir. That in his arvu that got mixed up, b'nitan b'matana achas in a similar carbon, let's say in the blood of a meiser behemoth. So whether it got mixed up in one cup or whether it's two cups, is you spray. If one cup, you spray one cup. If two cups, two cups, and you do matanachas because they're both the same thing, right? You only do one matana. And so one cup you just spray once, and two cups spray each one separately. What about matan arba? a carbon that has to have 4 in a carbon that has 4. Now we're talking about below the line, so it can't be talking about carbon chat. So arba means shtayim shein arba. You sprinkle on 2 diagonal opposites. You remember, right? So the southwest corner and the northeast corner, you spray it opposite each other, and you spray once, and it splits into 2. So we're not talking about spraying 4 corners because that's only a chatas, that's above the line. And we're talking about kabbalas; they all have to be the same. So below the line. So you know the matan arba, same thing. What happens if matan arba matanachas? A carbon, let's say a shlomim that you have to do, or an oila that got mixed up with a b'chayr. What do you do? Interesting machlekes. Rabbi Lezer says, matan arba. Rabbi Lezer says, do it 4. Let's be machmer and follow the 4. And Rabbi Yeshua says, matanachas. You only do once. And there's a problem with Rabbi Lezer. Because one of the kabbanas that's mixed up b'chayr, you're only supposed to do 1. And now you're doing 4. Isn't that baltaisa? Because you're taking the blood of the b'chayr and you're spraying it on 4 sides, all mixed together. But that's not a problem. Because what did Rabbi Lezer tell us before? He said that you imagine the rest of the blood is water. So you did your mitzvah of the b'chayr on one corner, and the part of the b'chayr that's mixed in this mixture, and all the other 3 corners is water. So it's no baltaisa here. Now Bishua says, you noster b'masachas. Better to do it 1, because we learned before. Basil says, but the evid, if you do only 1, you yaitzer. Says, how do you be sure? But you have in there also, let's say a carbon shlamim or oil. You have to do stein shenar, but you only did 1. And l'chatchila, everyone agrees you got to do it right. It's only but the evid. He did 1, so he says keep it. But to do l'chatchila, how do you about Taisif? What strikes me at kasha? You're no better. You're adding about Taisif. Rabbi Lezer says there's no Baltaisiv only if it's on its own. Now it's mixed with others. And now it's mixed with others. Now, what do you call it? And Rabbi Lezer says that even this, what he's saying, he's talking to Chachamim. I have no problem with Baltaisiv because it's Mayim. There's no Baltaisiv, it's Mayim. Now, even though, Teish already asks, Baltaisiv, even if you have no kavanah. Even if you have no kavanah, if you sleep in the sukkah in the 8th day, even if you have no kavanah, you're able about taisif, as we had. So l'chayda, what do you mean not able about taisif? The fact is you're able about taisif. Not taisif. Sorry, forshamat. But l'chayda, it's not a problem because when we say you have no kavanah, you have no kavanah. You went to sleep in the sukkah in the 8th day, so you're able about taisif. Here, since we have a rule by the Beis Hamikdash that the bezin does the thinking for you. In fact, we said before, don't even say, Mishahu, which by the Bezin do the thinking. So it's as if the Bezin are thinking not to have no kavanah. I want it to be water. It's not like we're spraying water, the blood of the b'chayr, we have no kavanah, it's a problem, but you're supposed to do 1. The fact is, you all say no. We're having in mind that the blood should be water. So it's a kavanah havchis. When you have a kavanah not to be yaitz in the mitzvah, then you're not yaitz, there's no baltaisiv anymore, that's for sure. Rabbi Yeshua says, it's the same thing. You're telling me there's no Baltaisiv. Why? Because it's not on its own. No, Shabbat's the same thing here. Void. Another thing. Rabbi Yeshua, this is his main point. When you went ahead and you went from 1 to 4, Avarta Baltaisiv or Sisa Majidech was a kumvasei. You're supposed to do by a b'chor only 1, and you did 4. So in a proactive way, you went against what you're supposed to do. But remember again, according to Rabbi Lezer, it's not a problem because he holds there's no Baltaisiv, it's water. But the way Rabbi Yeshua saw it, he doesn't believe in it. So to your way, I can't follow because it's Baltaisiv. And you're doing it in a proactive way. In my way, okay, you're supposed to do 4. You didn't. So what are you doing? Sheva Altaisa. And befrat you if you did any 1. No. So what I do wrong here? According to Rabbi Yeshua, I did wrong is I have in here shlamim blood. I have a b'chayr which is supposed to do 1, but I have shlamim blood. You got to do 2 shein arba. So what I do, I only did 1. So I didn't do what I should have done. Not I did the wrong thing. I didn't do it exactly. And plus, Beis Hill says that you yaitze b'di'evet if you do only 1. So therefore, I'd rather choose my way of going where it's in a passive way and b'di'evet it's all right than go in a proactive way and whatever. And this is a general rule. Shevel Tais is always better. Shevel Tais is always better. They talk about why we don't say that, Esadoy Chaloises, let the Asay of Zrika, of Shlomim, push away the loises of Baltaisiv. Or Baltigra. Baltigra doesn't, we're talking about in Baltaisiv. Okay, you tell me the problem Baltaisiv. Let the Asay of spraying the blood on 4 corners push away the loises of Baltaisiv. The only reason is l'chayda. It's a question that all the achrim. L'chayda would seem in logic. The license is totally unrelated to the assay. Here, the assay is regarding this carbon you got to spray for, but you have another license with about another carbon. You have other blood there, and that other blood has no benefit from what you're doing. It's two separate things here, and so maybe in this case you don't really say the assay is push away. I don't know. Have to think it through.
If the kohen has in mind the wrong carbon, what kind of pickle?
It's not the wrong carbon. That's not a pickle. Pickle is only if you have the wrong zman or the wrong makom. No, the wrong. Trina bailim is still a kosher carbon, just he's not yaitzer, except for carbon chatas.
But in this case, if you're saying he should like al derech shev al tasi, just have no carbon, does he also it messes up the carbon? I mean, the bailim has to bring it.
No. Rabbi Hill says that b'di'evid, if you did spray it once for any carbon, even a carbon chatas, you're yaitzer. So he's still doing it the right, but no, he shouldn't. So it's better to do the Yevid.
Of Shammai, he's got a problem.
Abelaz is a Talmud Shamutihi.
What might be done is very important about every shop. That's why. Why protected? What's the big deal about the beer touching the beer? But what about?
Okay, yeah.
But what about the lashon
hara?
hara?
Yeah.
So lashon hara comes out with the male sometimes when speaking, but with the beard, it doesn't actually be dime.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, that's the same idea. Yeah. That's exactly the same idea. Yeah, same principle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have a good day. See you tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.